Hello everyone and welcome back to K Guttay's online lecture series. Today we are going to deal with theory before theory, liberal humanism. What is this theory and what is liberal humanism and what was the development of English studies? We are going to deal with this theme. So, humanism is a philosophical and literary movement which has human being as its central concern. It also holds a central belief that human nature is something fixed and constant. Now, liberal humanism is a term which falls within the domain of literary criticism. Liberal humanists believe in the fixedness and constancy of human nature as expressed in great literature. Liberal humanism is a form of study that came before criticism. Liberal humanism is the traditional approach to English studies. Liberal humanism can be defined as a philosophical and literary movement in which man and his capabilities are the central concern. Liberal humanism inspired a scientific, rational worldview that placed the knowing individual at the center of history and viewed that history as the progress of Western thought. It served as the catalyst for the modern world's reliance on individualism and belief in a common human nature, scientific rationality, and the research for truth as universal knowledge and certainty in the world. The study of liberal humanism finds meaning within the text itself without elaborate progress of placing it in context. It detaches itself from its context and age, in isolation without any prior knowledge, prejudice, or ideological ideas without the text. Now we are going to discuss the development of English studies. Without knowledge of development of English as an academic subject, we cannot understand the basics of traditional approach to English studies. In first quarter of 19th century, higher education was the monopoly of Church of England. There were only two universities, Oxford and Cambridge. These were divided into two small individual colleges which were run like monastic institutions. Only men could attend them, and students had to be Anglican communicants and attend the college chapel. The teachers were ordained ministers. They had to be religious, who had to be unmarried so that they could live in the college. The subjects were the classics of ancient Greek and Latin literature, divinity which was taken by those seeking ordination, and mathematics. Anyone who was Catholic, Jewish, Methodist, or atheist was barred from entry and hence, in effect, barred from higher education, and that was up to 1820s. It had not changed since Middle Ages. Attempts were made to reform the situation, expand higher education, and introduce practical subjects into the curriculum. But they all came up against entrenched conservative forces. The breakthrough came in 1826 when a university college was founded in London with a charter to award degrees to men of all religions or none. From 1828, English was offered as a subject for study, and they appointed the first professor of English in 1829. However, it was not really as we know it. It was mainly the subject of English language, merely using literature as a source of linguistic examples. English literature, as such, was the first taught at King's College London in 1831, and another college of what later became London University. Grinton College, Cambridge opened in 1869, and Newham Hall later became Newham College at the same university in 1875. Both were for women, but women, though they could attend lectures and take exams, but could not receive actual degrees until 1920. Even at Oxford, and incredible though it now seems, 1948 at Cambridge. So women at Oxbridge only became full members of their universities in the 20th century. At London, Bedford College for Women in Bedford Square was founded in 1849, and women could take degree exams and receive actual degrees from 1879. So London University was ahead of Oxbridge. Edith Morley was the first female professor in England. She was appointed to a chair in English language at Reading University in 1908. The United States was ahead of Britain. The institution now called Wesleyan College in Georgia was founded in 1839 as the first college in the world chartered to award bachelor's degree to women. In 1850, Lucy Sessions, graduating with literary degree from Oberlin College, Ohio, was the first black woman in the USA to receive a college degree. In 1840, F. D. Maurice was first appointed professor at King's. He introduced the study of set books, and his inaugural lecture lays down some of the founding principles of literary study. The study of English literature would serve to emancipate us from the notions and habits which are peculiar to our own age, connecting us instead with what is fixed and enduring. Morris regarded literature as particular property of middle class, represents the essence of Englishness. So middle class education should be specifically English and therefore should enter on English literature. Morris was well aware of political dimensions of this. People so educated would feel that they belonged to England, that they had a country. Political agitators may ask what this can mean when his neighbors ride in a carriage and he walks on foot, but he will feel his nationality to be a reality in spite of what they say. In short, learning English will give people a stake in maintaining the political status quo without any redistribution of wealth. The study of English literature is being seen as a kind of religion. It was well known that attendance at church below middle class level was very patchy. The worry was that the lower classes would feel that they had to stay in country and they would rebel, and something like the French Revolution would take place. The Chartist agitation of the in 1830s for the extension of voting rights to all adult males was thought to be the start of this, and the first English courses were put in place at exactly the same time. The conventional reading of origins of the subject of English is this kind of thinking begins with Matthew Arnold in 1850s and reaches its height with publication of Newbold Report on Teaching of English in England in 1921. It is evident from material like Morris' inaugural lecture that this was happening much earlier. This was undoubtedly one of their motives, but the reality was much more complicated. There was behind the teaching of early English a distinctly Victorian mixture of class guilt about social inequalities, a genuine desire to improve things for every day, a kind of missionary zeal to spread culture and enlightenment, and a self interest desire to maintain social stability. London University degrees were taught by external license at university colleges in major industrial cities like Liverpool, Birmingham, Manchester, Sheffield, Leeds, and so on. All these places eventually becoming major universities in their own right. Hence, the spread of all subjects at degree level throughout the country. However, Oxford and Cambridge were suspicious of the new subject of English and held out against it. Oxford until 1894 and Cambridge until 1911. In the last quarter of 19th century, there was vigorous discussion and campaigning to establish a chair in English at Oxford. In 1887, the first attempt was defeated largely because of speech in convocation by Professor of History Edward Freeman. Freeman's speech is another key document. It touches upon several problems in English which are still unresolved. He said, "We are told that the study of literature cultivates the taste, educates the sympathies, and enlarges the mind. These are all excellent things, only we cannot examine taste and sympathies. Examiners must have technical and positive information to examine." Early supporters had advocated the systematic study of language, but early advocates of English wanted to separate literature and language study. Freeman won argument. Literature had to be studied along with language, otherwise it would not be an academic subject. So when English language course was finally set up at Oxford in 1894, it contained a strong element of historical language study, Anglo-Saxon, Gothic, Lato-Slavonic, Middle English, etc., from which it has still not managed to free itself entirely. In the United States, English became a distinct academic discipline towards the end of 19th century. In the earlier part of century, the humanities section of college curriculum was based on the study of Latin and Greek, taught by daily recitations in which brief passages were set for study and individual students were called on in class to translate few sentences and answer questions about any grammatical difficulties contained in the passage. But there were no lectures in which a broader view of literature and culture under study might be offered. Lectures and written examinations were introduced later in the century at Harvard and Cornell. They were regarded as dangerous innovations, not as the essence of conservative pedagogy which they would be taken as today. As century progressed, literature in English was allowed in curriculum and the methods of study was directly based upon the philological model imported from German universities, which is to say that it was heavily language based, involving the teasing out of the grammar of the text, the etymology of the word used in it. Later on, in 1880s, there were annotated editions of more writers like Shakespeare, Spencer, Bunyan, and so on. But there was the growth of a different approach to literature and literature teaching, one which was based on rhetoric rather than philology. These courses would be taught from major writers. Students would read them aloud and be coached in doing so with suitable way and expression, or would memorize them for public performance. From this approach evolved Howard Composition course, in which students would write their own pieces on the same themes, putting into practice the lessons learned from the models. But this course lost its oral element in 1873 and became a course of writing. At Harvard, teachers like Henry Longfellow, Charles Eliot Norton, and James Russell Lowell taught in generalized way of literary appreciation. Generalists and philologists often coexisted in the same department, but they were considered as unsystematic in their methods to prevail in the era of MLA, that is Modern Language Association, that had been founded in 1883. There was a greater change in the tradition in the Cambridge English School in 1920s, and the engineers of this change were a group of people began teaching at Cambridge in 1920s, including I. A. Richards, William Empson, and F. R. Lewis. I. A. Richards was a founder of Methods of Studying English. Practical criticism made a decisive break between language and literature. Practical criticism made it possible by isolating the text from history and context and simply analyzing the word on the page. A close study of literature was possible. It was no longer possible to offer a vague, flowery, and metaphorical effusion and call it criticism. Richards wanted close attention to the precise details of the text. Second Cambridge pioneer was a pupil of Richards, William Empson, who took his tutor's method of close verbal analysis too far and identified 7 different types of verbal difficulty in poetry. William Empson published 7 types of ambiguity in 1930, uses intelligence on poetry as seriously as if it were mathematics. The last of these Cambridge pioneers was F. R. Lewis. He was most influential figure in 20th century British criticism. In 1929, he met and married Q. D. Roth, subsequently known as Q. D. Lewis. His doctoral research was on the relationship between journalism and literature. Lewis founded an important journal called Scrutiny, which extended a close reading method of Richard's beyond poetry to novels and other material. So in this video, we have discussed the development of English studies, and in another part of the video, in another episode of the video, we'll discuss 10 tenets of liberal humanism. So thank you for watching this video. You can like this video, you can share this video, and do not forget to subscribe this YouTube channel. And you can hit the notification bell so that you can get notified the upcoming and the new videos. Thank you again.